Welcome to the Fiscally Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gardner, CEO and co-founder of Highline. Super excited today. We're going to kick off a brand new series focused on nonprofits. Highline loves nonprofits. They become a very important cornerstone of our customer base. And our very first guest in the series is going to be Bethany Creaser. Bethany is a lifer in the nonprofit ecosystem and also the current executive director for Early Childhood Alliance of Onondaga. So Bethany, thanks for joining and let's jump into it. Okay, Bethany, thanks for joining us on the Fiscally Awesome Podcast to help us kick off our first ever nonprofit series. How's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so let's maybe just set some context for everybody. So a little intro for yourself, your background, what you've done in your career, and what led you into being passionate about serving nonprofits.
Sure. Great. So I will say I was born and raised here in Syracuse, New York, and pretty much my entire career has been right here in this community. It's near and dear personally, but aligns with my professional goals as well. From as long as I can remember, I've always loved little kids. I always knew I wanted to be a mom, but early on, I thought maybe I wanted to have my own daycare center or I wanted to be a teacher. But I knew that little ones, I can't explain it. I just knew I wanted to work with little ones. I graduated from SUNY Cortland, and during that time, I did a couple of internships. I worked in a daycare, and I didn't
Awesome.
quite think after doing that I could do that every single day. And I give so much credit to our childcare and early learning providers. It's really tough work. Lots of kids. You're
I
outnumbered.
can barely handle 2 kids.
Yeah, I have 4 of my own, which is probably my most important job in the world and why this work is so important to me. And yeah, I realized very quickly I didn't want my own daycare center. I wanted to be a mom and have my own kiddos. I eventually started doing some work with youth, with adolescents. I worked in a youth center and a non-secure detention facility, Good Hope Youth Home. I just want to help people. And out of college, I started working at the Salvation Army, the Runaway Homeless Youth programs. And after a couple of years, I was a director overseeing outreach, drop-in center, case management, home visiting, a number of programs and services in the community. I was with the Salvation Army for 10 years. And then from there, I started having my own children, as I mentioned, and started to realize that at the intervention period where we would have greater impact and difference is before the baby's born or when the kiddos were younger. If we were waiting till they were runaway homeless youth, 15 years of history already there, it's hard to change and have an impact. I spent the next 15 years working at Catholic Charities. I was working with pregnant moms and as a teacher, and then I was overseeing the parent education, and then I was overseeing the Healthy Start work with our Onondaga County Health Department, which then translated into I became the program officer for clinical, family, and peer support services at Catholic Charities, and I was there for 15 years. I honestly would still be there if the opportunity to be the executive director here at the ECA did not present itself to me. And I have been here now for 2.5 years. So
Okay.
I caught it on. I'm sorry.
So usually like operational experience working in the nonprofit community. Talk about ECA. What does ECA do? What's their mission and what gets you excited about it?
Sure. So the ECA Onondaga, Early Childhood Alliance Onondaga, is dedicated to working to strengthen the early childhood system. So what that means is we work with all partners across all sectors, childcare and early learning, home visiting, pediatric partners. Our child welfare folks work with families with children under 5 so that our end goal is to make sure every kiddo is healthy, is thriving, is ready for kindergarten. And obviously, if you're ready for school, you're ready for life. Fortunately, in 2015, when the ECA was established, it was because there was a lot of research done and we realized that less than half of our kids were entering kindergarten in Onondaga County Ready to Learn, and less than 25% of our kiddos in the city of Syracuse alone. Unfortunately, we make national news for being a city that has the highest childhood poverty rates. And we as a community are committed to making sure that we do a better job of improving outcomes for kids.
Yep.
And we work with our partners to do that.
We got to be better. The city is the heartbeat of the entire community, and we
Yeah.
got to make sure that we take care of the people that are there. What's the core belief that drove you to go join ECA?
So again, I think as I shared a little bit of my history, it was teenagers and I was passionate with working with them. And then I adjusted and it was working with parents and working with families. So I started to have my own children. I realized that the most critical intervention period is really before the baby's born. If we can work to support families, parents, we have a lot of resources in Onondaga County, a lot of programs, a lot of free things for families, but families don't know about it. If parents can get connected to the resources, to have the supports in place and the accurate knowledge, information, and education to give their kids the best start possible, we are going to decrease the number of families that are in foster care and in the child welfare system. And we are going to increase outcomes to make sure every kid has the best start possible. And that's what we do here at the ECA. That is grounded in all of the language and the work we do with all of our partners. I say over and over again, being a parent, being a mother of four is by far the hardest job I have ever had in my life. And I've had some pretty hard jobs, but it's the most important one. And no one in our community should ever feel like they have to do this really hard, important job alone. And that's one of our key messages we share, whether we're talking to a parent at an outreach event or how we're working with our partners to share that message.
I love that. And that investment has such a downstream impact on the entire community too. So I love the work that you're doing, and we love that you're a Highline supporter, and we're happy that we can play like a very small part in the success that you guys are seeing at ECA. So can we move a little bit to the money side of mission? Because our whole thing on the podcast is we're trying to help operators of businesses, nonprofits, small businesses, just start to just build confidence in the finance part of the business. I think it's probably the scariest, most unfamiliar part of the business for many folks out there, regardless of where they came from in terms of like the input to what it takes to run a successful organization. So when people think about nonprofits, they often think about mission first, which is obviously the most important thing. You exist to support your community and to drive the mission home every single day. But over your career, what have you learned about how finance plays a role in being able to deliver that mission
Yeah.
every day?
So without the finances, without the budget, without the dollars, that's what drives the work. And I hear your question. Mission is the why. It's what we get up every day in the morning to do. But without having a clear picture of what revenue you have to drive the work, or potentially what gaps in revenue you have, it makes it really hard to be intentional with strategic planning and figuring out ways to meet the needs and meet our outcomes and goals, our deliverables, and things like that. Through the course of my professional career, from not being involved with budgets at all to overseeing a department of almost 65 people and multi-million dollar budgets, I will say that was one of the scariest things for me coming in. And one of the things I would say, even in my initial interviews, I don't feel comfortable with budgets because I haven't had a lot of training or experience. And oftentimes you feel like you could just get thrown in and you're figuring it out. And there's a lot of pressure there to, you don't want to make mistakes when you're building budgets, but budgets are plans. A lot of where it came from was everything was done with paper. Like it was
Yep.
purchase orders and paper and 3 layers of signatures and things getting stuck and moving really, really slowly and overwhelming and processes that didn't function really well. When you're in really large, I worked for Catholic Charities and the Salvation Army, which are two of our largest nonprofits here in our community. And there's a lot of steps and a lot of moving parts when you have organizations that large. And we would have to do planning or like forecasting. And oftentimes we wouldn't know what our We were looking at financial reports from 2 or 3 months prior because that's how
Mhm.
long it would take to close the books because the organization was so large. So that was a challenge to figure out how can we do planning when it takes a long time to get that information and systems moved really slow. So when I started working with Highline,
You can
I
plug. Go ahead
I
and plug.
pulled you right in.
Love it.
When I started working with Highline, it was a game changer for me. Everything is live in lifetime. The fact I have 3 directors, we use Bill.com, which we love. We all have our own Bill.com or Divvy card that allows us to make purchases, take pictures of receipts, upload everything, use technology in a way that keeps us efficient and keeps us moving quickly. We don't have to spend a lot of time with really outdated processes. When we need to know where we are with a certain grant, we can see it almost in lifetime. We have monthly financial reports that I can give my board of directors financial reports from the previous month, which is amazing. So we can see in lifetime where we are. I really can't speak enough about how happy I am with the financial support and services at Highline, and it has been night and day compared to what I've experienced in the past.
I love that. Yeah, you said there's a couple of things you said that I think are important. The planning process, I think, is a little unique for nonprofits compared to a for-profit, where a lot of times the for-profit is driven by revenue targets and they're backing into what's it going to cost us to hit these revenue targets. With a nonprofit, I find it to be framed a little differently, which is we have a budget that we know we need to go deliver on our programming or our mission every year. And we have to go figure out how are we going to subsidize all of those programs? Where's the money's going to come from? So if you don't have good inputs or availability of information, if you're not confident that you know where you stand and what it takes and what it costs to run all those programs, it can be really intimidating to actually put a plan in place that you feel comfortable putting your stamp of approval on and delivering to your board and being accountable to it every time that you guys meet for finance your board meetings. So I love everything that you said about the technology and the availability of the information. You described it being as so different than what you've experienced in the past. So many nonprofits out there in the world right now. That's just how it works. It's very paper heavy, which means the information flow moves very slowly also, which means you can't get what you need when you need it. Why do you think that's been the case for so long?
That's a great question. I think in some of our nonprofits, we've got folks who've been doing this work for a really long time. CFOs may have been there. You're just comfortable with the way things work. You may not even know what technology is available. But I do think, like you said, 2 amazing, incredible partners and organizations in our community. I think the size of the organization and just the way things have been operating. th- it is really hard. I'll be really honest right now. Yeah, it's stretched across all sectors. If we look at what we were, workforce is a big struggle. How we have the people to do the work
Yeah.
everywhere, people are struggling with that. So to try to change something or do something new or build something new right now is really tricky. And we're just trying to sustain and keep things moving.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. And I know there are layers of approval and accountability and things like that. I think it's lack of awareness. If people knew how easy it was to do things differently, I think it would be a no-brainer. It's like the example we try to offer free yoga to people because we know people are stressed and overwhelmed. People want to do it and need it. They don't have the time and capacity to do it.
Yeah. I think that's right. That's why we're kicking off a nonprofit series.
Yeah.
And we've really leaned in hard to the nonprofit industry because we're recognizing everyone that we work with, and we've worked with probably almost 100 at this point over our lifespan all over the country. The story is very similar. And there's so much gratitude for just the change that we've been able to kind of help bring to the organization to make it function better. But I don't think that it's an anomaly, things you've experienced. I think it's very common. And I think sometimes just often the industry's been overlooked for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But yeah, it's been fun to just hear the stories and hear people just be really excited about the way that things have changed for them. But did you
Yeah.
think when we started introducing all of these new systems to you out of the gate, was it overwhelming going from which you'd experienced before to using more
Um,
technologies?
So that's a great question. I will say, so I should have mentioned that when I came on, I started in my role at the beginning of 2023. And at that time, when I accepted this role, we were not only was I the new executive director, I was the first because we were also becoming our own nonprofit. And we were also moving away from our fiscal home, which was the United
Yep.
Way.
Remember
So
that.
there were a bunch of layers of to say I was overwhelmed probably an understatement on everything. And the financial, knowing how important having a really clear picture of your budgets and your finances is to do this work, it was really tricky trying to figure out how to move all the finances, how to do everything, and how to build things. There were a lot of processes. We had grown as an organization to the point that we needed to become our
Yeah,
own
that's
organization.
right.
And
All the history.
working the team, that the support and the onboarding and the responsiveness, the experience was nothing but supportive. And as intimidating as it all was, the training, the overview, it was very straightforward. Once we started using the tools, we were in love. It was like, wow. It really was a game changer. Everyone was so excited that we didn't have to track down paper, and we all take pictures of our receipts immediately so receipts don't get lost. Just little things like that. And the other thing that really, you mentioned the difference with nonprofit and how doing reports and revenue driven. We worked to customize the reports for our board because there are so many different ways Highline can present reports to us, and it's amazing. And we probably have barely scratched the surface to be able to get live time provide feedback. I can say what it is that I need, what my board needs to see, and Highline's able to pretty much tweak and adjust and customize our monthly reports that our directors get. So each director has ownership over the grants that they're responsible for, customize those reports so that they can then monthly review before I do. It just keeps us all communicating. It keeps us all having access to the information in live time. And it helps us when it comes to planning. Because let's be real, this climate right now in the nonprofit world, especially when we come human surveying early childhood, is very scary given all of the uncertainties with the federal funding right now.
Yep.
There are threats to Medicaid and threats to SNAP, which folks know to be food stamps. Talk about eliminating really essential programs like Head Start and changing the Department of Education. All of those things will have a dramatic impact on our partners, and our partners work with us to support families. So to be able to have a clear picture of what our finances look like, to do some clear projections, which is what we're doing right at through year end as we're building our 2026, so we can really see what the gaps could potentially be and be prepared in case additional cuts come, because we have to prepare as if they will, because that's part of the nonprofit world too. You never
Yep.
know if the funding's going to be cut.
Yeah, it's quite crazy times, a lot of uncertainty out there for nonprofits. And I think that's important what you said is you have to be realistic about what could happen. You have to plan, you have to build contingency plans. And I also think, and I've seen this with some nonprofits we'd work with, if you're not dialed in, if your reporting's not dialed in, if you're not timely getting information to your funders, or you can't spin up well articulated, crafted financial reports for folks you're soliciting funding from, and if the pool is smaller and they have to figure out like who do we trust most to be good stewards of the funding, that does make a difference.
Absolutely.
And I have experienced some organizations before we work with them where they damaged their reputation because they hadn't been able to give clean records to folks who had supported them. And it's really tough to bounce back from that. And then that impacts your ability to drive on and deliver your mission to the community. And then everybody who consumes those services also suffers. So it's all threaded together and connected.
Yeah.
I have a question,
Sure.
actually. I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Like when you were going through all of that, trying to figure out how do we peel ECA out of the United Way, we got a lot of stuff to figure out. Why did you choose Highline at the time? What was the reason? I think Meg O'Connell connected us. Shout out Meg
Yes.
for being a
Yes.
big supporter. But
Yes.
what stood out to you guys in the process when you were making your decision?
You just went there. Meg O'Connell, the president of Allen Family Foundation, is our board president for the ECA, really passionate about this work and a phenomenal leader in our community
Awesome
who
person.
her recommendation, she's helped other nonprofits get up and off the ground. And I trusted her judgment and her referral. I had no idea where to begin or where to go. I'm going to give Meg credit and gratitude because if you don't have good financial support processes in place, it just makes everything so much harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Meg. And thank you,
Yeah.
Bethany, for taking Meg's recommendation.
Yeah.
Meg's awesome. We've worked with lots of nonprofits that Meg's been involved with over the years. I want to come back to the forecasting and grants and how, because you started talking about like you're taking receipts, your directors are taking receipts, you're tracking P&Ls by grant and by program
Yeah.
right now. Can you talk about how using Bill, using Dave, you've been able to assign receipts and invoices to programs when the costs are being processed? How does that feed up into your ability to one, see it real time, but also report on it to all the stakeholders that you need to real time? Like it starts with good foundation of good systems and good process. And then you're not digging through filing cabinets to try to find this stuff. If we're doing it the right way, it's happening as you go.
Yes, absolutely. Everything was so siloed before. The directors would just operate out of this is my grant, these are the deliverables, this is what I need to do, this is the dollars I have to spend without looking at the whole picture. And so there's two things that I see that happen. Like we meet as directors weekly. They get their monthly reports. So there's those layers we can see things. But as we are doing so from like a delivery of service kind of perspective, we are able to plan and look at the whole picture. All of our budget lines, we've got program supply line, event line, things like that that were all being separated out, and we weren't working in a collaborative big picture kind of way where we can look at our spending to meet our outcomes, our overall outcomes instead of individual ones, if that makes sense.
It does.
So
So
that
maybe
go ahead.
I
Yep.
was going to maybe frame it like this. So it's the being able to build a plan from the bottoms up, meaning the budget for each one of your programs starting there. And then you can compile all the budgets for your programs. You
Yes.
can roll it up into a budget for an organization and you can track progress against each program and against the aggregate organization too, which is the right way to do it. That means you know where the money's going and you know how it all feeds up. And I love that your directors are accountable for their programs and their budgets too. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, from a funder perspective, we are very blessed and lucky to have the county support, county investment. We have a county executive who truly understands the value and rate of return on investment in the early childhood system. He has continued to allocate over $2 million into the early childhood system efforts and strengthening the system. So I have to say that. But we also have a number of dedicated, caring private funders who also believe in our mission. And we have funders who are saying, hey, where can we help? I'm excited. I'm blessed and grateful to have the funding support we do have, but knowing that's not always forever, we have funders saying, hey, you let us know if you need support, I'm ready to cut and where, so that when we can identify the gaps that we think are coming on the horizon and in advance and with a really clear need and an ask, we can have those conversations proactively with those funders and say, this is the gap, this is the need. Is this something you're willing to support, instead of having to be reactive or worrying about? I've been in positions where the funding ends and we have to let people go just because of funding. And that I'm always prioritizing keeping people working. We can make cuts in other places, but the hard reality in nonprofit is if an entire grant goes away and that's supporting a human who needs work, that's scary.
On that topic too of sometimes not knowing where your funding is going to come from for the programming that you've been providing, but maybe what you want to be able to provide in the future. I'm optimistic that even if the world changes and some of the federal level funding dries up, I do think the communities are going to step up and support the organizations that are delivering the most value and the ones who are doing it the right way. I do think communities will step up if they have to. I hope we continue to see funding come from all the places we've seen it come from, because kids are everything. Kids are the future. It's an area that we need to continue to invest more. But I do think that our communities, especially our community, takes a lot of pride in the work that nonprofits are doing. And I think that they'll step up to
Yeah.
further and continue to support. So I love that. You did answer my question perfectly.
Okay.
You started talking about people. So let's talk about how you plan for people and staffing and sustainability. Hiring and retaining great people, whether you're a nonprofit or a small business, like, it doesn't matter. If you have the best talent, you're going to have the best product, the best outcome, the best service, the best mission for your community. What do you think are some of the keys to attracting the very best people that you can find to a
Mm,
nonprofit? Because I
that's
do
so
think it's relevant to finance too, to be honest, and we can talk about that. But
absolutely. It's relevant everywhere. Good people drive the work, and not bad people. People who don't have the
right.
greatest strengths can have a real powerful impact too. It's a conversation I'm having with so many of my peers about our current workforce. And it's this post-pandemic workforce. For a while, we used to say it was a generational thing, that work really hard, work ethic, it's really hard to find. And I think many of us find ourselves, I don't want to say settling, because it's not a really good way of putting it, but we're hiring folks that we may not have hired pre-pandemic because the pool of individuals that really wants to do this human serving work is much more limited than it used to be. And then we have individuals who they think it's a challenge. I could have an entire
Do
podcast on
another
current
podcast on
workforce.
it.
We're not gonna go there. But when we're looking for talent and how to recruit, I do think a big part of it is flexibility. People are juggling a lot, and work and home life balance is important. People need to be able to have flexibility to work when they can be most productive. And I know, as a mom who had little ones at one time, I'd be home with the little ones feeling like I needed to be at work. And when I was at work, I felt like I needed to be home, and you're torn all the time. So flexibility is important, but also setting forth really clear expectations of what the job and the responsibilities are going to be really transparent and making sure the mission shines through so that folks know right up front what they're getting into as best as possible, because people are taking jobs and then they just quit. They don't last. The turnover everywhere has been a nightmare. And as we talk to our partners, people are doing the work of 2 or 3 jobs. And it's something that does keep me up at night, is worry about the workforce. If we don't have people to do this important work, it doesn't matter if we have the revenue and the dollars to pay them.
Yeah.
That is one of my biggest struggles as I look at my budgets. We have to do a lot of no cost extensions. You cannot control the people who have to go out on medical leave, the people who are you can't keep in positions. They're moving, they're just quitting. They can't keep the job, and you have these salary vacancies. You can't you,
So explain those cost extensions, because I don't think everybody
oh,
knows what it is.
oh, sure, no problem. You apply for a grant.
Yep.
You are mostly my private grants, and there are dates in which you have established in your grant agreement to complete all of your deliverables for the grant. And there oftentimes I've had a couple of no cost extensions, which means you're just requesting to extend the end date of the grant because you aren't able to spend all the lines in the grant for whatever reason. You provide a justification, and pretty much every funder right now understands the justification of the workforce
Yep.
struggles. If you can't have people to do the work, you can't move money from program supply line to a salary line and vice
Yep.
versa. It doesn't work that way.
Yep. So that's the important part I was hoping you'd get at, which you did,
Yeah.
which is a lot of the grants can be they're reimbursable, and they're earmarked for very specific things, and sometimes even very specific roles. And if you can't spend the money, can't get the grant's reimbursed, which keeps the organization going. And the timing you just talked about is important because maybe you can't fire the program up until the back half of the year and you have to go get an extension on it. The
Yes.
ability to anticipate that happening and how much cost you need to defer, I think is really important to be able to proactively communicate to whoever is providing the funding to make sure that they feel like they're informed. And if they're informed, they're probably much more apt to work with you and give you an extension. And I hope that our forecasting is playing a small role in helping you anticipate that.
Absolutely.
It's a
Absolutely.
shameless plug, but I think that's a very
No.
important thing. And I think it's a timing thing. If you're not on top of it, I think it's really hard right now because of how much volatility there is
Yeah.
to make sure that you're on top of all this stuff.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we can wrap it up with a couple of rapid fire fun questions where we
Hey,
can drop some knowledge to the other executive directors in nonprofit organizations. If you could leave them with one tidbit, one mindset shift as we move into this new world that you think folks have to be prepared to make, what do you think that it is?
that's a big question.
Big one. You can have a couple different answers if you want.
We have to be ready to be flexible and ready to pivot on the drop of a dime. Ready to pivot, ready to be
Ready
flexible.
to pivot.
Yeah. I know you said rapid fire. I think this is an important thing to note that I didn't mention earlier. For example, two of our very large partners, Catholic Charities and Interfaith Works, have had to lay off like multiple people because of the refugee resettlement work that we do in this community. And they've
Okay.
been and pivot, stop. How do we continue to try to do the work that we need to in lifetime? We have to be ready to be flexible.
Be resilient for the community. You got to figure out different ways you can have an impact. I love that one. Know
Yeah.
when and how to pivot. I think that's a
Yep.
great one. All right. So next question. One myth about nonprofits that you wish would go away that you now have a chance to dispel.
I think sometimes people think nonprofits are all mission and caring for people, and sometimes grassroots, or even some people will say like hippy dippy, like you're working with people, and they don't realize the real business and behind it, the financial business side. It's all important, all connected.
It's a
Right.
complicated
Yeah.
business, very complicated
Absolutely.
business. Yeah, I'm going to deviate from our rapid fire, but I have this parallel in my mind that I've drawn between the nonprofit world and then you have the venture capital startup world. And there's parallels like you have a board, they have a board. You have fundraising is a prerequisite to success. They have fundraising is a prerequisite to success. You're both trying to fulfill the mission of the organizations. They're just very different. One is innovation and profit focused. One is innovation and mission community focused.
Right.
So I think it's a very complicated business. You have a lot of stakeholders, like you have board management, you have fundraising partners and donors, and they all require good communication from you guys all the time. Very human capital heavy organizations. And I think that induces a lot of complexity around management. So I give tons and tons of credit to the work you're all doing. And 65 people is a lot of people to be responsible for.
That was my previous. Right now, we are a smaller organization, so we've got 15, a small team, which I love the intimacy of it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Then you build it up.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Sorry. I digress a
That's
little bit. Okay.
that's
If you got a $500,000 grant today that you did not expect, what would you do with it?
that's a big question.
We won't hold you to it.
Yeah, no, I know. Our childcare and early learning world and childcare assistance is being waitlist and I could put it there. I could put it into back into our refugee resettlement partners to get those people back working. There are so many places I could put it that to pick one, that's a loaded question, and I don't know where I would begin because we don't have enough revenue as it is to do what we need to do.
The answer is if anybody out there is interested in the work that Bethany and Issa are doing, they are very willing and able to deploy capital and donations and financial support to make the community better.
Yes, and we
Wow.
have a long list of needs and places we could use the funds.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So where can everybody find out more about ECA? Should they go to the website? How do they
Yeah.
get in touch with you if they want to talk more, hear more?
Sure. So you can absolutely go to our website, which is ecaonondaga.org. It highlights all of our initiative areas. It also has our contact information. My email is bcreaser@ecaonondaga.org. Always you can email, but the website I think is really the best place to get information and to be able to reach us. I'm happy. I love when folks have an idea or if they know there's a gap and a need and you want to be creative and let's come up with solutions. That's what we pride ourselves on doing, coming up with solutions to meet the needs of the families in this
I
community.
love it. Do you have any events or campaigns that are coming up that folks should keep an eye on or pay attention to?
So we always have events, and so much of the work we do is also parent driven. If we're serving parents, we have parents at the table with us. We have a parent advisory council. They help us plan
Ooh,
our events and things. Every single year, we do a family fun fest. I just want to make sure I give you the correct date here. I don't want to give you the wrong date. And we host it at Destiny Tuesday, Tykes Tuesday, where families can come out. We do it in August, and this year it's gonna be August 12th from I think whenever Tykes Tuesdays is. I think it's like 11 to 1. We will be posting the flyer on our website,
okay.
but save the date, and that's more for families. We are 10 years old this year. We haven't decided yet if we're doing any big celebration, but I do wanna note the team has been at this for 10 years and doing really incredible work. We are doing events all the time for families,
So keep her
reports
looking
and
out.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
check out the website and follow
Yep.
Bethany. Bethany is on LinkedIn. You can find her on LinkedIn too. So I think that's a wrap, Bethany. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for kicking off our nonprofit series with us. I think that you shared a lot of great insights. I hope a lot of other nonprofit leaders or just interested folks in the community listen in. And thank you for being a Highline supporter and for all the kind words you shared today.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. I feel honored to be your kickoff,
Be number
and
one.
I'll look forward to hearing future podcasts.
Yeah, all right. That sounds
All right.
good. Bethany,
Thanks.
have a good week ahead and we
You
will be in touch soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.